Okay, Jessica, it should be going back to you.
Okay.
And when it prompts you, just select Show My Screen.
Uh-huh.
And we can see your screen. And so far on the line we have Bobby, Joan, Jody, Kelly, Peggy, and Valerie, as well as Holly and Jessica with OU. Here at Drug Free Action Alliance, we have me. This is Derek, by the way. Hello, everyone. Sarah and Claire. And Jessica, do you want to take it away, or do you know if we're waiting on anyone else?
I'm not sure if we're waiting on anyone. Jessica, you're more than welcome to go ahead and start.
Okay, so Derek, the only issue is it seems like maybe everyone else can see the slides, but I don't have the slides aren't showing on my screen anymore.
And all we see is a black screen, like your desktop. We don't see the slides.
Okay. So do you need me to pull it up?
Yeah, you'll want to pull up the presentation from your desktop, and then you can run it from there.
Okay. Are you open? You know what, Derek? I'm wondering if it might be easier because I'm not on my personal desktop.
Are you logged in as yourself on the computer?
Yeah.
Then you should
be able to go to the B drive. We're getting it figured out just one second.
You all should have the slides, just so you know.
And the final one's in the B drive, too.
Did you log in as yourself on this?
No. Oh, I logged in through email.
I have it brought up on my screen as well if you'd prefer that I just click through as you talk. We can do it either way.
Your account. You bring it, or you can't get anything.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Derek, that would be great.
Super. Take controls back. Okay, so right now everybody should see my screen that says Applying the Holden Model of Youth Empowerment.
Great, thank you. All right, so for today's webinar, we really have two primary objectives, and Derek, are listed on the next slide.
And there's a slight delay when I click, so just bear with us.
Okay, great, thank you. Really what we're hoping to accomplish today is to get an understanding and to have a discussion around the Holden model of youth empowerment. And in order to do that, we're first going to be walking through and discussing the model just to make sure that we all have the same working conceptual understanding of it. And then from there, we're hoping to apply this model to the work of the Ohio Youth-Led Prevention Network, and specifically discuss kind of what tools and resources would be needed in order to apply this model to the work. But before we get started, I wanted to at least spend a little bit of time introducing ourselves. I've had the pleasure of meeting some of you in person, but I know that there's others on the call who I haven't yet had a chance to meet. So I was hoping that we could just briefly, if you could just go around. Everyone's unmuted, right, Derek?
I have everyone muted now, but I can unmute everyone.
Okay. If we could just briefly go around and let me know your name, how long you've been involved with the Ohio Youth-Led Prevention Network, and how you became involved in this work.
And before we do those introductions, Jody, you're still not showing as able to speak to you, so you might need to dial into your phone, and I just sent your audio pin. So do you want to begin with Bobby?
Good morning, everybody. How are you?
Hi, Bobby.
Well, I'm Bobby, and I've been on the OYLPN, I think, since like the first full year. I was invited after the original programs, Pride, Youth, and TI got together. I've been doing youth-led prevention work for going on my 17th year, and I think it's the best part of prevention, and I think that the idea of OYLPN is one of the best ideas that anybody could have ever thought of, because when you get a group of people around a telephone or a table to talk about how the state can be better, it doesn't get better than that.
Thanks, Bobby.
Hi, everyone.
Joan,
this is Valerie. I'll go ahead. I was just going to jump in. Is that okay?
That works fine, too.
Sure. Been involved for 4 years. Excited to have this webinar today and see how we move forward. And great things are happening around the state in youth led, and it's a really exciting time.
Thanks, Valerie. Joan, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I'm Joan, and I'm new to this, and I'm involved, I think, because of actively caring for people, which is the youth-led model. And just as an FYI, I might have to duck out halfway through. I'm going to play it by ear. So if I
Okay, thanks for letting us know.
Sure, thank you.
And Jody, you're also on the line. I don't know if you've been unmuted.
Am I unmuted now?
We can hear you.
Hey. Hey, okay. Where the screen is, where the phone is, are on two different ends of the room, so I'm kind of going back and forth. I'm Jody Galloway. I am the Director of Marion Crawford Prevention Programs. I've been here about 20 years and have been doing youth-led prevention pretty much that entire time. And I've been with the OYLPN group since the beginning.
Great. Thanks, Jody. Is Kelly on the line?
And Kelly has her hand raised. It looks like she'll be able to talk to us, but she might be having some difficulty. But she did type in that this is her first year. She's very jazzed, and she's been doing the work for 15-plus years, and will ditto everything that Bobby said.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kelly. And Peggy?
Hi, I'm Peggy. This is my second year with OYLPN, third year doing youth-led prevention in southeastern Ohio. I'm based in Athens, and I also agree and ditto what Bobby said.
Wonderful. Sarah, did you want to briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Sarah Malik, and I'm the program manager for the Ohio Youth-Led Prevention Network. And my first full year of working here, so going into the second year of OYLPN, I guess, for me. I'm a product of youth-led prevention, so I know that this work is effective and awesome, and I think that we're going to have an absolutely fantastic year, and I'm very excited with the way and the direction that things are going. So, yay!
Great. And Claire, I know you're on the line as well.
I'm Claire. I'm a social work intern here at Drug Free Action Alliance, and this is my first time getting involved with youth-led.
Great. Derek, did you want to say anything?
Sure. I'm Derek Longmire, and I am the designated webinar person, so I'm just helping facilitate this through today. But I've been involved in the Youth-Led Prevention Network a couple years ago, and like Sarah and others, I'm a product of Youth-Led Prevention as well.
Great. And he's a webinar facilitator extraordinaire, so we're really appreciative of that. Holly?
Hi, I'm Holly Raffel, and I'm at Ohio University's Voinovich School, and I, too, am a product of youth-led prevention. And I'm just grateful for the Adult Council for giving your time this morning and for continuing to roll up your sleeves and do this hard work as we push forward for the future of our youth in Ohio.
And lastly, I'm Jessica. I know I've met many of you in person, but some of you who are new to the council I haven't had a chance to meet in person yet. I'm working with Holly at Ohio University with the Voinovich School. So I'm new to this project as of August, but I'm not new to the ideas of youth involvement and youth participation. I've been researching and practicing and studying in this area for the past 8 years, so I've just been thrilled to be working with the network. and learning about the good stuff that you all do. And I'm really looking forward to today's discussion to talk about how we can apply some of these models to the work as a framework for what you all do. So with that said, I wanted to start just by briefly acknowledging the work that's been done up until this point. Over the past year, you all, the Adult Council, has been working pretty hard on developing a theory of change. And you should see the theory of change up there on the screen. So the theory of change that you all developed states if a community adopts, embraces, and promotes protective factors using effective evidence-based strategies, then the community will protect and promote the health and well-being of Ohio's youth. This theory of change is further outlined in the logic model, which many of you are already familiar with. But I wanted to make sure that we're clear on how the Holden model kind of fits in with the work that you all have been doing with the logic model and with your theory of change. The first important thing to know about both the logic model and the Holden model is that these provide a theoretical grounding for the work of the Ohio Youth-Led Prevention Network. Both of these models are grounded in the theories of positive youth development and youth empowerment, and they ultimately are focusing on how to promote the health and well-being of young people. Again, that's really clearly represented in your theory of change and how you believe you can go about promoting the health and well-being of young people in Ohio. What the Holden model does, in addition to talking about how to create these changes, is it further operationalizes the logic model by detailing the process or the work that the groups do in order to create these changes in their communities. Both the logic model and the Holden model are very useful for practice and evaluation. For practice, it helps to provide a rationale and a background for the work that we're doing. In evaluation, they both help because if groups can articulate what it is they're doing, evaluators know what types of processes and outcomes they should be looking for. So we can ensure that we're evaluating the work that you all know that you're doing. So Derek, now you can go on to the next slide. You guys already had a little sneak peek of the Holden model, but here it is. It looks like there's a lot of details and words, but we're going to walk through this in detail today. What's key to know about the Holden model is that the top half, which I have highlighted in yellow, kind of orange depending on your screen, focuses on the processes. So these are the group processes that lead to young people's participation in youth-led prevention efforts. We're going to be talking in detail about those three processes which contribute to their participation today. In the middle, which is highlighted in blue, there's collective participation. And again, we're still on the same slide, Derek, thank you. The collective participation, again, focuses on when these processes are implemented well, how young people end up participating in youth-led prevention. And then at the bottom of the screen, highlighted in red, are the outcomes that we would expect to see for young people and communities as a result of participating in youth-led prevention efforts. We're going to start today's conversation by focusing on those top three processes that lead to the participation. And the first one that we're going to discuss is adult involvement. Before I talk about Holden's perspective on what adult involvement in youth-led prevention looks like, I'm curious because I know when we went around and you introduced yourselves, some of you shared that you've had, 17, 20 years in youth-led prevention efforts. And I just want to know, based on those experiences, what do you believe the role of adults is in youth-led prevention efforts?
Everybody should be unmuted so you can all holler in at the same time.
Thanks, Derek.
Jessica, can you repeat the question?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'm going to share what Holden's perspective is with adult involvement, but before we talk about his perspective, I really wanted to understand the perspective of those on the call. So from your experiences with youth-led prevention, what do you believe the role of adults are in these efforts? another way of thinking of it is, what are the adults' responsibilities in youth-led prevention?
Jess, I would probably throw out and say that with my specific involvement, I've always taken the role of being a guiding support. Our program functions solely at the discretion and direction of our high school students. The only time that I pull what I call the Bobby card is if it's obviously going to cause danger or harm. So whatever their thoughts, feelings, ideas, and opinions are, we go for and we try to accomplish. So I say that they drive the bus and I sit in the back and ride on it.
Bobby, when you facilitate when they're making the decisions, do you play any role in facilitating those conversations, or is that also just youth-led?
It's genuinely youth-led. Like I said, the only time that I would even engage in the conversation is, one, if they're talking about doing something that is dangerous, harmful, or downright insane, or two, if they're having disagreements or discrepancies that they can't work out themselves and get through and move the conversation along, then I might offer some support and some guidance in how they can maybe come to a resolution in the situation, but I rarely, if ever, make the decision.
Okay. Great. Thanks for sharing, Bobby. Are there others who want to share about their experiences of what their role is with these initiatives?
And I can share via Kelly through her question section. As a coalition, our youth generally report out their efforts and the adult support, provide feedback, encourage, provide linkages, etc.
So the youth report out efforts and the adults provide support and encouragement?
Correct.
Great. And linkages to resources. Yeah, that's key. That's great.
I think it's AC4P, this is Joan. You know, there is an education part in terms of the AC4P model in terms of the basic principles that we, the adults, do provide, well, at least initially, and now the kids sort of take it and run with it. And I really see our role as really helping them to facilitate sort of the movement and then anything else that comes up here at school. So it's really in partnership. But initially there was sort of more of a an educational / creating awareness role that we have.
Great. So I'm hearing a lot of...
I also see our role as kind of one of a liaison between the ideas that they want to do and the things that our community or our schools might be not as willing to do without the adults saying, yes, we're behind them and we're going to be there and we're going to be assisting. So I think a lot of that is also, I guess, as their advocate and kind of being the person that talks the schools into the things that the students want to do. Sometimes it's doing a lot of lobbying or education of school systems or administrators, but if there's something that's not quite happening the way it should, going in and having that discussion with the administration to let them know that this is what the students are attempting, and maybe they're not listening to their students as well, but they're more likely to listen to us.
Right, kind of using that power as an adult on their behalf.
Yes, that's what I meant.
Great. So it sounds like people have had kind of diverse experiences and played diverse roles in their work. Oh, I was muted for a second, so I'll repeat what I was saying.
Mute all in you. I didn't realize that.
No problem. So it sounds like a lot of the adults that were sharing their experiences with the youth-led prevention initiative kind of highlight the different roles that they may play at various points. Joan mentioned that maybe initially she was playing more of an educational component and bolstering the young people's knowledge and skills, and then kind of backing away once the young people have the necessary skills to engage in this work. And Bobby talked about his role with, helping them to facilitate the conversations and helping them maybe to learn how to make decisions as well, so that they can ultimately do that as a group by themselves. So I think, and a lot of what we just heard in this conversation is going to be highlighted and is represented in the Holden model. One of the key things to understand from the Holden model, though, is that the model really sees adults as, they take very seriously the role of adult guidance. So we usually say youth-led prevention efforts, and there's no mention of adults. But this model really asserts that adults are ultimately responsible for the success or failure of the youth groups. So it's a really critical role that adults who are guiding these initiatives, even though they're left out of the title, their role is really, really critical. And it affects the ultimate participation of young people in the groups. And we know some things about what effective leaders do, or what effective adult leaders do in this context. But one of the things, when we're thinking about what their characteristics are, there's dispositional aspects, so there's just characteristics or personalities of adult leaders that young people really, really appreciate. So young people really, in terms of dispositions of adult leaders, what young people see as effective are having adults that they can relate to, adults who they feel listen to their ideas and take their ideas seriously, and adults who demonstrate respect for what the young people have to say. Those are the dispositional traits that young people really, really appreciate, and research shows that that's really important for the adult who's working with the young people. They have to be relatable, and they have to just be respectful of who the young people are. But it's not just about dispositional traits. It's not just about making sure that the young people like you and feel comfortable with you. Adults also have to have really specific skill sets in how they guide the young people's knowledge in order for them to create change. And what we find is that often when these young people are first starting youth-led prevention efforts, there's a lot of knowledge and skill building that needs to take place. So at first, and Joan, I think this is what you were referring to, but at first it looks a lot more, the adult involvement is a lot more clear, because they need to first kind of build the knowledge for the young people, help them learn how to facilitate a group meeting. How do you make decisions with the group? How do you actually create effective change in the communities? And I think intuitively this makes sense, and is actually something that I saw demonstrated with the Ohio Youth-Led Prevention Network at the Youth Summit, right? We knew that the Adult Council, you all stepped in and started with kind of that direct instruction to build the young people's skills, because you knew that they weren't going to be able to just come in right off the bat and start making great changes in their communities. But as time progresses and as the young people's skills begin to build, that's when the adults often can start to step back a little bit and start to allow the group to really identify the leaders, identify the skills of the youth, and let them kind of facilitate and lead the changes. But the adult is always present, and the opinion of the adult always matters. And that's something to make sure that when you're working with young people, that throughout the whole process, the guidance might look more direct at first, but there's always a role in guiding the youth and really being a participant in what they're doing. I think one thing that often happens is that we mistake the youth-led to kind of mean that our responsibility as an adult is just to get out of the way and let young people do what they need to, when in reality there's really a critical role for them. One of the other roles that adult leaders sometimes play is in recruitment for youth to these initiatives. So I'm just curious, how are young people currently recruited to your groups? And just for clarity, Sarah, you can also talk about this from kind of the youth council at the state level, and how young people are recruited there, and others can share about their involvements with their groups at the local levels.
I'll just start then. So at the state level, oh, sorry, am I talking over someone? Okay. So at the state level, we have typically in the past put together an application process. And this year, we had the youth call in and do like an interview process to make sure that, you know, it fit with kind of our vision for how OYLPN was going to go this year and that kind of thing. But anyway, so at the big rally that we had where we had 1,800 youth, we put an application, a youth council application into the bag of every adult advisor. So, and then we talked about it on stage. So we talked about here's what the youth council does, here's how we function. You know, you can be a part of this too. So we had a big audience, target audience through that. And then we also sent it out through our 150 networks that we're connected to. So that's kind of how we promoted it. And then some of the kids that were involved last year kind of told their friends or other people, hey, this is a really great organization to be involved in. Here's some of the things that we do. So we kind of use their voice. So, and then also some of the adult council members were helpful in recruiting some of the youth and telling them about what OYLPN is and how we function. So that's kind of how we've recruited. Obviously, I'm not sure about people in the past before me, but I can speak to, you know, the past years. So.
Mm-hmm.
This is Peggy. We have kind of two separate groups. We have a school-based group. For that recruitment, it kind of depends on the school. An employee from here will go in and kind of talk up TI and try and get kids involved. The best method that we've used is probably using people who have already been involved or kids that have already been involved in TI to do the recruitment for us, just because kids listen to kids better than they do adults. And for our youth coalition, which is our group that actually plans our camp and everything, once they've attended one camp, there is an application process with reference letters and everything that they go through for recruitment here.
Mm-hmm.
And Kelly focuses on recruitment from various topic areas. So she's got different youth-led groups that she focuses on. For instance, the Respect Club focuses on dating violence and relationship issues. Huddle focuses on substance abuse prevention and leadership development. And SAD focuses on other destructive decisions and community awareness. So depending on the interests of the individuals is kind of the route that they are directed to for the groups that are set up. And all our school clubs then have youth leaders that recall at the beginning, that recruit at the beginning of the school year. Thanks, Kelly.
Are those adult school leaders or youth leaders?
I deleted the question, but I think they're youth leaders.
Okay.
Yes, they are youth. Thanks again, Kelly.
So it sounds like,
oh, go ahead. I can say the way that we recruited here was initially we did a couple assemblies and kids sort of, you know, brought themselves to it. Now that we're 2 years into it, we the kids bring their friends. There's really a push to really grow the movement now. And then we also, as adults, like key administrators, those of us really involved, we recruit certain kids for a variety of reasons, either students that we see coming in that we want to get involved in something, and or, you know, kids that we think have, you know, some strong leadership skills. So it's really pretty diverse, but so there's, I think, 3 ways of doing it. Kids sort of self-put themselves in, kids bring their friends, and then we also, you know, encourage other students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it sounds like everyone uses kind of a combination of there's, you know, self-selection with some youth, like you just mentioned, and then it's a combination of adults really identifying some youth and inviting them to participate, and young people also who are experienced with the initiative, inviting young people to participate in the youth-led prevention network. So again, that's another role in an area that sometimes we overlook in terms of adult involvement, but they really are sometimes responsible for just getting the members at the table to begin with. So that's really critical. One last thing that I wanted to acknowledge before we start talking a little bit about the group structure is that the Holden model acknowledges that there's other adults besides just the adult leaders or the adult facilitators who also impact the participation of youth. So for example, parents are often important in impacting the participation. They can provide support and encouragement to become engaged in these initiatives, and sometimes they provide the very practical support of transportation so that young people can actually get to where they need to be. And we also know that the agencies that host the youth groups, such as the schools or a community center where the space is provided, has an influence, and as well as the state support from people such as Valerie, who kind of impact where the direction, the funding, and everything for these initiatives to happen. So in addition to the adult leaders, it's important to acknowledge that there are multiple adults who impact the ultimate initiative. Are there any other comments or questions, or Holly, anything you wanted to share about the adult role before we move on to discussing the group structure?
I think it's just really important that we keep in mind what the adult role is in youth-led adult-guided prevention. And I think as the Adult Council, something that's really important is to point out that what research and the research of the practice of youth-led prevention tells us is that adult role is really important and it's necessary. And that's really what funds the jobs for those positions. And so we need to be really mindful of the language that we use. And so when we say things to people in the community like, oh, my job is here just to make sure they don't burn the place down, or my job is just to get out of the way, we're not really doing ourselves a favor. In fact, we're doing ourselves a disservice because we're not acknowledging the important role as an adult ally in the lives of these youth. And so I think when we say those comments, what we're trying to say is that youth are strong and they're empowered, and I'm doing all these wonderful things to empower youth to make decisions. But by minimizing our role as adults and your role as adults, what we're in fact doing is saying that we're not important, and that adults shouldn't be there, and we don't need that funding, we don't need that legitimacy, and we don't need that support. So as we move forward, and as you move into the next Adult Council meeting, I would just ask you to kind of think about that adult role and think about what we can do to sort of turn the tide and shift the conversation a little bit that shows adult importance while also keeping the emphasis on the youth and highlighting, kind of that fine line, that tightrope that we're walking here.
Great. Yeah, I think sometimes the adult facilitators tend to be too humble in the great work and efforts that they're doing to ultimately get the young people to the position where they can lead and create these community change. So moving on to group structures. And again, you can see from the arrows in the Holden model, it kind of has the adult involvement in the middle, and then this again is emphasizing the critical role of the adults, because the arrows represent that the adults are ultimately the individuals who are responsible for creating the group structures and the group climate. So in terms of group structures, these kind of focus, as the title suggests, on any of the structural elements to the group. So just how the group operates. In the Holden model, he identifies 5 different structures that are important. The first are incentives. So with youth-led prevention efforts, young people can be offered a variety of incentives to participate in these initiatives. And these can range from kind of more external incentives such as monetary. They can get paid to actually participate in these initiatives. Sometimes they can receive stipends for their involvement if they attend a set number of meetings. And again, that's used just as an incentive to get young people to the table and to continue participating. We also see other types of incentives offered. We know that food is effective, right? We saw that at the Youth Council, so just knowing that when they come that they can have dinner and a meal and the conversation to follow. So it doesn't have to be as extreme as paying for young people to participate, although some initiatives do that depending on their resources that are available and how the adult decides to structure the group. And then there's other kind of smaller incentives that are equally effective depending on the interests of the young people who come. And sometimes young people are helpful too in just saying what would make it easier for them to participate so that the adults know what they can provide to kind of incentivize their ongoing participation. The second structure focuses on the decision-making processes. So are youth ultimately kind of leading the decisions? Are they making the decisions? And I think what's critical to remember here, and we've touched on it already, is that these decisions might be, the conversations might be facilitated by an adult, but the important thing is that the young people are ultimately responsible for making the decisions. But that doesn't mean that adults aren't necessarily at the table and participating in that conversation. They're just not the ultimate decision maker. And I think that for those of you who were at the Youth Council retreat, we saw this when we were working on the logic models and how important it is to have just guided questions to allow young people to have the conversations and to focus on what's really important in order to make decisions as a group. The third structure that this model highlights is the relationship to existing adult groups. And we actually already heard this from someone earlier in the phone call. I think Kelly mentioned the linking to other groups. Adults play a really important role in linking these youth-led prevention initiatives to other adult groups or community collaboratives that already exist in the community. And these linkages in turn provide really important support and resources for the youth-led prevention initiative. When you bring in adults from other groups, sometimes they can provide the knowledge and the education that's necessary to help young people to kind of bolster their skills and their knowledge in order to do the good work that they're trying to do. Fourth is the opportunities for leadership. And this is really talking specifically about what role the young people play within the group. Are they ultimately getting to a point where they can lead the discussions because they've been instructed or guided on how to lead good discussions or how to facilitate conversations? Are they planning the activities? Are they the ones getting out into the communities and implementing the strategies that they've decided that they would like to be working on? So again, with opportunities for leadership, it might look different at different phases of the initiative, but ultimately the goal is for the young people to kind of be the ones out there implementing the strategies. And then finally, there's an emphasis on support and resources. Like any group, what they're able to do is ultimately going to depend upon the resources that they have available to them and the support that's offered to them from the adults and from others within the community. I kind of think for those of you who have been working with Holly in the past with the SPIF-SIG, when I think of the supports and resources, that's kind of that capacity column on a strategic plan of like what's available, what are the resources that are available for the young people to implement the initiative and the linkages. So those are kind of the 5 key structures from the Holden model. And I'm just wondering, based on your experiences, are there other structures? Is there anything that you think is missing from this list in terms of structures that affect youth participation?
Everyone is unmuted, so you can chime in at any time. Jessica, can you ask that question again?
Yeah, if there's what other structures you believe affect youth participation? Or did Holden capture it all?
Hello? Can you guys hear me?
Hi. Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, it's Cheryl. I didn't introduce myself because I came on late, but I don't know if this fits into one of the categories that's already on there, but I think like a feeling of the kids seeing through their projects. I'm blanking out on what the word is, but like their I don't know, I'm blanking out, but their involvement and like that feeling of empowerment and having a say and a part in this stuff, I think is a huge part of the group structure as well.
Mm-hmm.
So Cheryl, are you talking about follow through and seeing a project through to the end and completion, not just talking but actually doing?
Yeah, like I think when the kids are when they have an idea and then in the end they see that whatever happened, what happened because of an idea they contributed. I think I know there's a word for that. I just keep blanking out, but that they're feeling that they were a part of it and that this is really their thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, they feel some sort of ownership.
Yes.
I like that, Cheryl, and I think maybe some of that also, when we'll talk next about the group climate, and I'll be curious what you have to say after we talk about the group climate, if you think that what you're getting at is kind of represented in that category of those feelings or beliefs, or if you think it's something distinct from what we'll talk about that really represents a structure.
Okay.
But that is a key one, and it's important. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding it correctly after we talk through how the next category.
Okay.
Do you all use these structures? I mean, when I'm walking through and talking about the structures and you're thinking about your groups, do these seem accurate? Do they seem to represent what you do in terms of your work with young people and the structures that are in place for them to make the decisions and participate?
Oh, I think so. I think there's, yes.
Great. So if there aren't any other comments, and we'll be talking about the model in our work later as well, so if there are comments to group structures, we can open it up for conversation later. But let's move on. Cheryl kind of transitioned us, I think, pretty nicely into talking about the group climate. Again, the important thing to remember, you can see it represented by the arrows here, is that the adult involvement leads and kind of ultimately affects the climate of the group. And whereas the group structure, as the name implies, focuses on the structural aspects of the group climate really focuses on those emotional aspects of the group. Focuses on the beliefs and attitudes of the young people who participate in the group. And in particular, there's 4 emotions or beliefs that kind of create the group climate. The first is group resiliency. And essentially what this means is that there's a belief within the group that they can persevere even when setbacks or failures occur. We know that this is hard work and that sometimes, they're going to confront obstacles in what they're trying to accomplish. So that idea or belief in group resiliency is really critical, that the group understands and believes even when we're faced with challenges, or even when things don't necessarily go the way that we intended for them to go, we know that we can regroup and we have some skills that we can rethink what we did and persevere and try again. For group cohesion, that's just kind of an idea of like, do we like each other? Do we feel an identity? Do we feel like we are a unique group? Sometimes we look at group cohesion and say, are people also getting together and corresponding outside of formal meetings? How close does this group and the members of it feel to one another? And again, that impacts their participation, because if they feel like they're a member of the group and if they feel like others in the group really value their presence, they're more likely to continue to participate in these initiatives. With collective efficacy, this is just referring to the group's belief or their confidence in their abilities to work together towards a common goal. So it's really just a matter of looking and seeing how well do group members believe that they can work together and accomplish something. And closely related to collective efficacy is this idea of outcome efficacy, which is the group's belief not just that they can work together, like collective efficacy emphasizes, but their belief that they can ultimately accomplish the goal, that the behaviors, the actions, the strategies that they're implementing, they truly believe will lead to the outcomes that they've identified that they want to affect. And this builds the confidence, basically, that their actions will result in changes in either other youth or in the community setting. So Cheryl, I'm going to go back to you really quickly. Do you think, when you hear these 4 things, are any of these what you were talking about with the feelings and beliefs of young people, or were you getting to a different idea about kind of like ownership with the group structure?
No, I think that, I mean, I saw that, and that's why I was like, I don't know if this fits into something else, but I just think that that's a huge part of, I think, what makes effective youth-led prevention, when the kids really feel that sense of ownership. But I think that collective efficacy and the outcome efficacy and that group cohesion, I think that kind of fits into that. I just didn't know if with the structure it was an important piece too. But I guess it doesn't in this chart. As long as it's on there, it doesn't really matter what part it's on.
Yeah, that's what I was like. As long as, because that's an important idea, and I wanted to make sure that it's captured in some way. But you do see the idea that you were mentioning. You believe it is like appropriately reflected with group climate?
Yeah, I think so.
Great. Based on the experiences of the adults on the phone call, are there other beliefs or feelings that you think impact youth participation in these efforts? And one thing that I want to emphasize that this part is really their group beliefs or feelings, not their like individual beliefs or feelings, but how they feel as a group that might impact their participation in youth-led prevention.
I definitely think that they're more likely to be strong and involved if, you know, these 4 things that you were just talking about. I definitely see students that have been a part of our group that maybe weren't as cohesive with the rest of maybe some of the other members and maybe didn't participate as much. But I think that when they saw a purpose, that they saw a reason to come to meetings and they saw a reason to come to events. It wasn't just because we were counting numbers, there was a reason for them to be there. And I think these 4 things kind of tie into what that reason is. You know, having them explain that, I don't know if they could ever explain that, but those things really look at, you know, the why we need them there. Because a lot of times our students will say, well, I've already done this, so I don't know why I need to be there. But then they get there, and a lot of times they go, okay, now I see. It's because maybe we've got different students. And I always say, well, yeah, you might have gone through staff training, you know, 3 or 4 times, but not with the same group of people. And so it's like helping them see that, you know, maybe they've got something different to add. So it's like that sense of purpose. And I think that kind of ties into all of those 4, whatever you call them, group, I didn't know, important group, whatever those words were.
Jody,
and I printed off your slides, but I printed them too small, so I can't read them. So,
so it's good I'm talking through them each, huh?
So I'm kind of like looking at these slides, and I'm just like, yeah, I have no idea what they say, so I'm making my own notes. Yeah.
Jody, that's really helpful in me understanding more what Cheryl was saying, because what Cheryl's saying is that sometimes the climate and the group structure are linked together. And so in order to create that climate, you have to provide a structure for it. And so, and I guess I understand more why now Holden has that line above structure into climate, and it's kind of that one-way arrow, because now what Cheryl's saying really resonates with me, coupled with what you're saying, is that we need to create an environment where they have this sense of purpose, sense of ownership, which then leads to that climate part. So thanks for sharing, both of you.
Are there any other thoughts or comments about the group beliefs or feelings before we move on to discussing collective participation?
This is Joan, and we had an interesting dynamic last year with our group. It got really too tight, and they were, and it became to the point where it turned other kids off because they became such good friends. and it felt exclusive to students. So we really made a conscious effort to really pay attention to that and really, really open it up. So anything that feels exclusive, we're just sort of not doing right now, and the kids understand why we're doing that. So that was just an interesting thing to sort of watch that process.
That's a really interesting observation, Joan, and it brings us back to the group structures and kind of what's in place so that everyone who joins the group is kind of able to take on some sort of role with it and participate in the decision-making processes. And it also sounds like it highlights the role of the adults, and kind of it sounded like you acknowledged and saw this happening and knew that that was maybe something you needed to intervene with, and it's affecting how you're structuring the group this year. Is that correct?
Yeah, the kids were pretty clear. Like some of the kids that weren't quite as involved brought that up to our attention, and so we've been very aware of it. And the other thing that we shifted this year was we've started to use what we call like a rotating, leadership, for lack of, we couldn't figure out a word, so that, for example, tasks within the group rotate from a month. So this person might be responsible for social media this month, next month, somebody else, just as a way of keeping everybody has a role in making sure that sort of moves and that we really do it as a group. And the kids, that sort of, again, gets back to that sense of belonging, and we all have a place in here. That's going to help. Really.
So it sounds like, do you think that structural change of rotating the tasks has affected the group climate to feel so that they're more cohesive?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. That was a really clear example of how this all links together. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I think it's super important that kids have a true understanding of what youth-led prevention is a comment from Kelly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that, again, Kelly, thank you for bringing that up, because I think that goes back to there's certain knowledge and skills that they just need to have before they can participate in these initiatives. And that, again, highlights the really critical role for the adults in kind of building young people's knowledge. So, yeah, this is all, I was thinking, Kelly, I'm not sure if this is what you were getting at from your comment, but this focuses a lot on the processes, right? So the group structures, the group climate, and not necessarily the content, but the content is still a critical part for the group to have in order to ultimately create what we see in red, any of like those community changes. They need to have the content as well. So this model is kind of applicable to all youth-led community change processes, but there is that content piece that's really critical if they're ultimately going to create the change. Okay, great. Let's briefly touch on collective participation, and then we're going to be wrapping up kind of the portion of walking through the model and opening it up more to discussion of how we think this applies to the work of youth-led prevention. So for collective participation, there's just one really critical point that I wanted to highlight. Again, the processes that we've walked through, the adult involvement, the structure, the climate, those three processes ultimately are believed to contribute to the participation of young people in these initiatives. And what's important is that when we think about participation, we're not just thinking about how often youth participate. We're not just thinking of like the quantity of their participation, how many times they come to the table and participate in our group meetings. But collective participation also tries to understand the quality of that participation. So by the quality, it's thinking about how actively are young people engaging when they're here, how emotionally invested, how psychologically invested are they in the work of the group. Because we know that sometimes if young people show up and are physically present, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're mentally present. And in order for some of the outcomes that we see for that individual change to really happen for the youth who are participating, we know that it has to be some sort of quality. They have to be emotionally invested when they're present there as well. So that's really the key with collective participation. I was curious, are any of the groups now, do you track participation in your individual initiatives?
We keep track of attendance at our Youth Advisory Board meetings. We keep track of attendance at school-based meetings. And we keep track of who comes to a variety of different events that we do each month. But we don't really keep track in any kind of logical way. I guess we just have an idea of who comes to things. But we don't really, there's not really a specific tracking way that we do anything.
So Jody, just so I understand, when you say that you track, but there's nothing specific, do you mean like you don't have a document that you're tracking it on? Like you're just kind of like mentally noting who's there?
Well, we have kids sign in,
Okay.
and so we have sign-in sheets for every event that we do, but we really don't do anything with them after the fact. Like we don't say, you know, John, who's a sophomore at Harding High School, has been to 12 events this year. We don't do anything with that. You know, that kind of thing. We don't have, but we know how many students and who comes to different things. It might make a determination for us down the road when it comes into moving into a leadership role, because we have different stages of involvement, and students, there's a lot of things that we can do that any student can participate in, and then we have different things that only students who've been involved, who've been to trainings, who've made a commitment not to use, and who've been participating can be a part of. So it's kind of, that helps us to determine who gets to kind of move into different leadership roles.
Got it.
Jeff, in Licking County, we do everything that Jody said. A lot of what we do is based on what we call projects, so like the different activities that we do to help make our community happy, healthy, safe, and drug-free. So we keep track of all of the meeting attendance. We have taken it that step farther where I have a staff member who actually has a database that tracks this kid was at this event, and keeps track of the hours that they were at that event, so that for a couple reasons. One, at the end of the year, a lot of times I get requests to verify volunteer service, for college applications, all of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And two, we tell our school partners, because a lot of our recruitment is two phases. The adult phase of our recruitment is that we have really strong partnerships with all of our school districts, and our school districts want to know the exact number of hours that the students from their school district completed. So we can maintain and grow those partnerships with our school districts by saying to them, you know, you had 4 kids on council and the 4 of them completed 600 hours of service to the community. And it also, we use it as an incentive to the kids. Every quarter we kind of analyze the numbers and not necessarily place them in like a 1, 2, 3 order, but we say this, you know, we tell the kids that if they want to know where they fall on the number of hours completed list, that they can come up and ask us.
Mm-hmm. And are you saying that they get like some sort of reward or incentive if they've completed so many hours?
No, other than the intrinsic, I'm making my community a better place. That's all they get out of it. We don't give them prizes. We don't, you know, we don't even announce it publicly. Like, so we wouldn't say like Jenny Jones is #1, because the idea of it could deter people, or it could turn kids off. Like, well, you know, I'm not good enough, kind of a thing.
Absolutely.
We know it, and then if the students want to know where they fall in the list, then they can come up and ask one of the adults, you know, privately, and say, you know, how many hours have I done so far? The only expectation of hours that we have on our kids is we have a structure in our group where we do have like a president and a vice president. We call them the officers council. And when they run, like a politician, to be elected to one of the officer seats, they know that they have to commit at minimum 5 hours a week to the Youth Leadership Council. So there's 9 kids that I'll randomly send text messages to or something asking them, you know, what have you spent your 5 hours on this week? And we keep track of that as well.
Oh, interesting.
And Kelly has some of a similar structure where there's a commitment from the students as to hours that they provide, and they keep track of that through attendance. And many of the students who participate in the Youth-Led Report in their college application, so it's a good recruitment tool and an application tool for the youth that they have within their further education. And Sarah, did you want to mention something?
I think like for reporting purposes, we kind of have to keep track in a way, but you know, we have our kids sign in too, and then at the end of the year, and I actually stole this from Cheryl, so but we add up all of our hours too. And then I know for Mary Marvel's group, as I've helped volunteer with her group, I know she does kind of the award system and tells, you know, congratulates those kids that you know, have put in the most time and effort and all of those things. So I know she's very diligent about how she keeps track. She has a book and really makes sure that the kids are keeping up with their hours, and there's like even a requirement for them to stay in the group. So I know that's kind of how she does it.
And some schools require that there's some service learning. Thanks, Kelly. We had an intern here last year who, as part of her National Honor Society, had to have a certain amount of volunteer hours. So we had to track and report that back to them. So there's things for not only college applications, but just to maintain some of the groups that they're in while they're in high school as well.
Right.
Yeah, and I was going to say, too, we, like Sarah said, we track everything that the kids do, even if they come down early to work on something to prepare, and we keep track of that in our computer system. We have the kids sign in when they come to our weekly meetings for a couple of reasons. One, we give our kids 3 attempts, 3 meetings, I guess you could say, and they don't have to be consecutive, but after the 3rd meeting, then we ask them to sign our drug-free pledge. So we have like an open enrollment, and you can come in at any time, but after the 3rd meeting, we say, you know, we'd like for you to sign this. It's your choice now that you've had an opportunity to be a part of this this program. Would you like to sign the pledge to be drug-free? And then we keep the pledges signed in a book, and if they don't sign the pledge, then we don't use them for any leadership decision-making until that they sign that pledge. So we kind of have like an open meeting, so it's, you know, come drug-free, stay drug-free, leave drug-free, but if you don't sign the pledge, then we can't use them in any type of leadership, like decision-making type of thing. So that's one. And then like Sarah said, we do, at the end of the year, we have an award ceremony, and we recognize the students who have given hours, and we do like a tiered system. So we give people gold, silver, and bronze for their hours contributed. And we don't, like Bobby was saying, we don't announce necessarily every single hour, but we say they've been involved this long, and in just this year they've been able to contribute this much. And everybody gets recognized, but some people we recognize at a higher level because they were able and gave more. And then we give somebody, the person who gave the most hours over the course of the year, we give like a Volunteer of the Year award. So we have a pretty easy way to track that. If we didn't, I don't think we would do that because it'd be really time-consuming to tally up all that. But since we have a pretty easy way to track it, we do that.
And it sounds like for a lot of you, the participation kind of relates back to the incentive, too, if that some young people need a certain amount of hours for other things that they're involved in, or that there's like an incentive for some sort of recognition at the end of what Cheryl was just talking about.
I don't know if it's so much incentive. I mean, what we say is like, yeah, you can get hours for coming down, but then that maybe is what is in the incentive to draw them in the beginning, like as a recruitment tool almost, but that's not really what keeps them, I don't think. I don't know that our little certificates that we make are something that's really a big deal to the kids in terms of incentive or reward or anything, but it's more of a just our way to recognize them. For some of the kids, I mean, they give a lot of their time to this program, and we want that to go noted. So, yeah.
So I'm hearing a lot of ways in which people track participation in terms of quantity. Does anyone track in any way kind of the quality of the participation? So like any records of like how engaged or how involved the youth is when they're present at those meetings or when they're showing up for activities? That's the harder one, I think.
We don't have a document per se that tracks that. I think just my co-coordinator and I, we notice it and we make a mental note and we're like, okay, you know, Susie or whatever didn't talk at all. Maybe she was having a bad day. We'll see how she is the next meeting, and, you know, and we'll take it from there. But we don't document, I think, the quality of participation in anything. Our kids, we do give a reward to someone, the person that has participated the most. So even though we're not documenting it like on a Word document or Excel, we are keeping track of it kind of mentally and noticing just how much each kid is involved in order to pick the award winner at the end of the year.
Uh-huh.
Jess, that's a question that for us this year we wanted to do was that qualitative engagement.
Huh.
And we also do the visual, just the observation piece. But as I mentioned already, our group focuses on different individualized projects that the kids conceptualize and then plan, coordinate, and implement and evaluate. And we now have a formal document that kind of is looking at that engagement. Was, you know, how involved, how committed, what types of functions does the did the project engage in? Because we have what we call pillars that we work off of. So we're starting to try to capture that data in addition to like that just involvement data.
Jess, we actually have to track that for our ADAM tracking that we have to give them. So we track involvement kind of like that. We'll say, did they attend a meeting as like the first step, or did they take part in a committee by sharing ideas, and then the next step would be that they take a leadership role at something that we did, or were they at a speaking engagement representing us, or were they a staff at one of our conferences or camps? And so we kind of have this tiered process to show our ADAM board that there's different levels of involvement. So we track that. We have meetings after everything, not after everything. We have meetings after our weekly youth advisory board meetings. Our staff will sit down and say, okay, I worked with this committee today, and this person really stood out. They were really giving a lot of ideas, and they were really taking a leadership role, and then that gets noted. Or this person wasn't speaking as much, but they were really thoughtful in what they were contributing. So we kind of discuss as a staff what youth seem to be holding back, or what you, like, kind of like Peggy was saying, like what we're noticing, and then when they fit into those tiered levels, did they participate or contribute in a committee? And then the next step would be, did they take a leadership role at a meeting? So did they lead? Were they planning an informative night where they're doing a game show on statistics or whatever, and then they led that? So that's kind of that next level.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that example, Cheryl.
Yeah.
And Kelly did have Kelly had a comment as well. And for them, they do sporadic focus groups and do other observations. And they also do follow-up of the youth that drop off to see why they're no longer come to meetings and what has happened for engagement. And related to Bobby, she says that you better share that document, Bobby.
Yeah, it sounds like there's some good resources. great. It sounds like there's some good resources with collective participation. So let's just briefly move on to talk about the individual and community changes. I'm not going to go through these in as much detail as we've talked about the processes and participation, but I do want to at least acknowledge that the final step with the Holden model is that we're engaging in these processes which lead to participation, and as a result of participation, and this is on the next slide, Derek, as a result of the participation, that creates changes in the individuals, in the community, and also in the group. You'll notice that there's that the individual, community, and group changes, those are short-term changes, and then there's the ultimate kind of long-term goals associated with each level of change. But what the Holden model basically asserts is that if young people are participating in these initiatives and these processes, in the short term, they're going to feel more empowered. And if they feel more empowered, they're going to be more likely to remain involved. And some of their own attitudes about whatever prevention initiative they were leading, some of their own personal beliefs about, in this case, this model was specific to tobacco prevention initiative. So that's why you see it listed as changes in openness to smoking, that there would be some sort of change in the individuals who have participated in their beliefs as to how open they are to smoking. Hopefully that their openness decreased as a result of participating in this initiative. The model also highlights that as a result of these initiatives, there's some level of community change, and that can be that there's greater community awareness, or there's a change in opinions about whatever the issue or the topic was that young people were working on. And another way of kind of looking at the change, not just in terms of the community's perceptions, is also just the number and type of activities that are related to the issues that the young, so maybe the young people chose tobacco prevention, and then we see other work by other community groups also trying to address the same issue. So we see that they've created that awareness and kind of motivated other people in the community to start talking and start doing something pertaining to this issue. The one thing that's not in here that I did want to note with the community level change is that sometimes we also see just a level of change in adults' opinions in the community of young people as a result. So they might realize that young people are capable of creating community change. So their perceptions of the youth in the community sometimes change as a result of these efforts as well. And then lastly, the model highlights the group changes that can occur. And this is just really focusing on, were the activities completed? Did the activities affect the outcomes? Were the members satisfied? Did they, remain involved? How did the group, and this plays back to kind of that group climate and their participation, but did they ultimately as a group feel like they were successful? Were they satisfied with the work that they collectively accomplished? Are there any questions just about that, the individual, community, or group changes, the ultimate outcomes that the model posits are a result of participating in these initiatives? Okay, great. Just one final bit. This whole model is about youth empowerment. So on the next slide, I just wanted to briefly talk about what youth empowerment means. So Holden's model, it's called the Holden model of youth empowerment. The ultimate goal is that young people engage in these empowering processes. As a result of engaging in empowering processes, they themselves feel more empowered. So I just wanted to make sure that we have an understanding of what youth empowerment means. And I'm curious, when you guys use the term youth empowerment, what does that mean to you? What are you thinking when you hear that term?
For me, I think it's sort of like that they feel confident in their ability to make an impact or to have an impact.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with Joan and maybe expand a little bit and say And I would say that youth empowerment is the idea that an adult would help a young person feel secure in his or her understanding of how to make a community better, and then motivated, that young person then becomes motivated to actually engage with the community at all levels to help implement that change.
Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of times when the term empowerment, it's become a trendy term lately, I feel like. So you hear it a lot in different settings, and often it is used as kind of just a synonym for confidence. So if you feel, you hear someone say like, oh, I want her to feel empowered to speak her mind, like I just want her to feel confident in her ability to speak her mind. And sometimes that general definition, researchers define it just a little bit more specifically. So it is about confidence or efficacy, that young people believe that they can do something, but empowerment is really meant to be specific to the social and political affairs. So that when we say empowerment, we're meaning kind of confidence in that realm, confidence in their ability to affect change in social and political arenas. Sometimes, we broadly understand empowerment as just the individuals that they gain an influence over matters that affect their lives. So when we're talking about youth empowerment, that's why I have highlighted for the process of youth empowerment, we're trying to build young people's skills specifically so that they can participate in social and political affairs that are important to them. And of course, key to this process and key to them becoming empowered are their opportunities for authentic decision making, which is represented in the model. And then as a result, if a young person is engaged in these empowering processes, if they've been able to kind of participate in their communities and take on community issues, as a result, they end up feeling empowered, which is actually they believe that they can create change. So they feel like they're able to influence those social and political systems. So that's ultimately what the Holden model is trying to outline. So I think the next slide, Derek, just shows the model one more time. And I'm thinking that seeing the whole model now might make a little bit more sense. I think when we first put it up there, it seems just very busy and overwhelming. But now we can kind of see again, highlighted in the yellow-orange up top are those processes which lead to the participation, and then highlighted in red that ultimately lead to the changes that happen as a result, or the outcomes of that participation. So at this point, I'd like to open it up for conversation and just to hear general reactions. We spent some time walking through this model in entirety and understanding its different components. What do you think of this model?
Well, I think it's nice to finally have a name to what we do and why we do some of the things that we do. To be able to look at it and say, well, we're trying to do, we're trying to build collective efficacy, and this is why we're doing it in this way. I don't think we're always able to put a name to why we did the things that we were doing. So now it's nice to be able to say, looking at a model, we're doing it this way so that we can build this, which will in turn do this. So it's nice to have kind of a flow chart to be able to show people who just think that, we have fun and we eat lots of pizza.
And Kelly indicated that it's very actionable. So it's not so obscure, and it's something that they can actually use to make change.
sounds like people are feeling like this is a model that could be useful for the Ohio Youth-Led Prevention Network and the work that you're doing. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
I think it's very important to have the background, like everyone was saying. I think it's important to have this research that guides us, because if we're going to show that what we're doing is effective and evidence-based, we need to have kind of the background behind it. And I think it's important that we always keep this and other models that are evidence-based in mind as we continue to grow this network and make it more effective.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also important to have something like this that kind of says this is why we just don't have youth to rubber stamp adult ideas. To really be doing youth-led prevention, so many times I'll hear that, but then when I challenge one of our groups to say, are you sure you're not coming up with the ideas and you just want the students to implement them, it's more, guiding them to come up with some suggestions and ways to do things. Because I think historically community coalitions and other groups want youth participation, but they want youth rubber stamping the programs that they're doing rather than just helping guide the youth into coming up with successful projects.
I agree with Jody. I like that it's kind of saying what we do, and then also saying this is what needs to happen in order to be true, effective youth-led prevention. That's going to actually make a difference with the kids, as opposed to what you can say you did.
Mm-hmm.
It helps to validate the decades worth of time and effort and energy, and legitimize youth-led prevention as a viable, reliable way to affect community change.
Yeah. So I have some specific questions pertaining to the model that I want to discuss, and those are on the next slide, Derek. It sounds like the first question we've already sort of answered through our reflections, that when it sounded like when we were going through the processes and the participation, that this model was resonating with you and reflective of the work that you all engage in, and you could provide many examples for us, which was great, of how this reflects the work that you're doing with young people. So I want to spend the remaining time that we have talking more specifically about how this model could be used to document your work. So it's reflective of the work that you all are doing, but how do you think we could use this model to actually capture that work?
It may help to provide some background of where we're going with this. And I think it's one thing to have a model that's out there, but this is Holden's model, and he used it with tobacco prevention, and it's grounded in research and evidence. But now when we look to actually evaluating the work of youth-led prevention in Ohio, so what we're doing as a network, but also what individual programs are doing back in their own communities, you have to take the model and adapt it and personalize it to what you're doing. Because one thing that we're having a lot of difficulty with in evaluating youth-led is you have to have an evaluation object, or an evaluand, as we call it when evaluators speak. And right now, if we don't know what people are doing and it's not articulated on a piece of paper, we cannot evaluate it. So we're in a situation where it's very difficult to leverage continued support from your authorizing environment, and by support I mean funding and support for these initiatives, if we don't have something on paper as to what each youth-led program is doing at the community level. And so again, it's one thing to have the Holden model, and that's important, but then we need to really take that model and boil it down to what are you doing, Bobby? What does the Holden model look like in your community? How could you fill out those boxes for Licking County? You know, Jody, how can you do that for your community, and Joan and Peggy and Kelly? And so think, you know, how could you use this model to document your work? What would you do if we just gave you the model and said, okay, now we need you to tell us what you're doing. We need to know what we're evaluating. So what strategy would you use, or what technical assistance or support or tools would you want to be created to help you document your work into what youth-led looks like in your community?
We're doing a strategic planning day for looking at how AC4P and, you know, the PBIS model we can really integrate better in here at the high school. And I'm thinking maybe there's a way for us to incorporate, you know, this model as a part of that planning day. So I'm just tossing that into the mix, and so if, you know, I can bring that to the group and we can figure out how to work with that. So, and I think we. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say we're a little behind the eight ball on some of the PBIS stuff just because of things up here, and so we have like our main person from Virginia Tech coming up and spending the day with us and doing this. So I think I'm going to, you know, share this with him too and get his thoughts and see if there is a way that we can sort of map it out because it flows nicely. So I guess for us it's an opportunity to see what we can do with it.
Good, good. And you present an interesting point. I think, you know, the Holden model would be your backbone, but your strategic plan would be the hands and feet and what you're going to do. And so I like how you're thinking that it goes with that strategic plan because that's really important.
Holly?
Yes?
Ask me the question again. I've thought about it so long I've stopped myself right out of an answer.
Basically, the hard work that we put in developing the theory of change is done. Now our hard work is how do we get everybody who's doing youth-led prevention to conceptualize their program using the Holden model. So if I were to ask you, Bobby, I need you to put down on paper what you're doing in Licking County using the Holden model framework, what would you do, or how would you conceptualize that, or would you need tools? Because that's really our next step, and I think the vision of what the collective impact that all of these youth-led prevention programs can have on moving those indicators we have in the logic model, it really depends on everybody articulating what they're doing so we have something to evaluate.
Well, I think OYLPN is a perfect vehicle to create those tools. I think it's necessary for tools. I mean, one of the things that we've been talking about as a group, as a team, at those OYLPN meetings is that there's good work happening all over the state. The thing that we need to capture, and I think maybe that's what you're asking, and that's why I was like running myself in circles and confused myself, was that we need a mechanism with which that data can be captured. And if we can produce that, like we did the logic model that we did, like we did the toolkit, if we can come up with some sort of structural mechanism that then we can take back to not only our necks of the woods, but also spread far and wide, you know, to every crack and crevice of the state, and try to pull that data that's going to give us the answer that we're going to need to then to be able to speak to those funders and whatnot. I mean, I think that to me, it's that quote unquote simple.
Bobby, I think that's a great idea. I think when Holly did the evaluation, she did come up with an evaluation tool, and I think you know, based on our strategic plan last year, and we didn't develop that regional structure like we were hoping, so we didn't get to push that out. But we do have that tool, and I think that's kind of what you're referring to, or what it sounds like you're trying to get at. So that is already developed, which is
and
good.
Sarah,
right?
Sarah, I don't think those tools necessarily fit because I think those were developed before we really had a good handle on the logic model. And so actually so I think those tools we could probably almost use for reference or use to kind of go back to. But initially, I think when I got involved with the project, it was kind of looking at what those indicators or benchmarks were, and then we realized it was really tough to do that without a logic model or a strategic plan, so I'm not even sure if those are even relevant. I think it just goes back to the first step is taking that Holden model and filling in those boxes for what you're doing locally. So what are you doing to address adult involvement? What are you doing to address collective participation? What are you doing to address climate? What are you doing to address structure? And do we envision that as just a one-pager like we've done with our SPIF-SIG, logic model and strategic plans? Or is it a narrative? I mean, what would that look like? If, think about if we were to ask everyone who's doing this, to help us, and we are actually going to do that through this new funding. And we're tasked as a group, what does it look like to help people document their program using the Holden model as sort of the skeleton?
I think it has to be simplistic in design, but it has to be able to give explicit data. And because I am not Dr. Holly Raffel, I don't know how that's accomplished, how we can accomplish that, but that's why you're here.
Well, no, that helps us good feedback to keep it simple. Just keep talking.
Because I think I'm thinking of, individuals in my community that are doing some level, it might be elementary school level, youth-led prevention, or they're doing work that they just don't know is youth-led work that might have trouble with jargon or complex ideologies. So if we can come up with something that says, hey, are you doing this and this and this? That means you filled in this box. Then it's not only a tool that helps us develop our individual communities in the community that is the state of Ohio, but it's not overwhelming. In 2014, when our attention span doesn't last longer than that of a 5-second interval, we need to be able to capture, even with adults, a simplistic way of mining that data.
And I also heard something in there, too, tucked away, Bobby, is kind of the idea of mentoring or having someone take on that role. Hey, are you doing this? How can I help you think through that? So do you see the role of adult council members as serving as mentors to someone who's trying to fill it out for the first time?
Easily. I mean, I know that when I signed on back many moons ago, that was one of the expectations, that we were going to be the champions of this cause, and that would definitely be a component to that title.
What other thoughts do we have on how we can get folks to engage in this process of thinking about their programs in terms of the Holden model?
Holly or Derek, is there a way we can go back to actually see the model? I'm trying to picture it now in my mind, and it's not happening for me. And I'm trying to answer your question, but I can't picture all of the parts to properly do that.
Yeah. Sure, there it is, Peggy.
Thank you.
Next time, Peggy, you should just come up to our office, and we could all be here together in Athens.
No, I thought about that after you guys said you were at OU. I was like, hey, I'm right here, too.
And I was just thinking it would be helpful to have some type of a tool to assess kind of where maybe their strengths or weaknesses are or priorities, because I think the model is good as long as they can see how it is impacting their community or how it could benefit their community.
So that connection back to the logic model and looking at the data that they have available.
Absolutely.
That's a good point. So almost using the two together. Was that Kelly via Derek or Derek?
No, that was an individual thought of mine.
Oh, Derek, you said you were just the webinar guy. But that was a good thought. Thank you for interjecting. This is definitely a big project that we're going to have to take on, and after just the hard work with the logic model and the strategic plan, I know this group is definitely up to the task. And so I think just think about this and hopefully use the webinar moving forward as some food for thought for that next adult council meeting on, is it the 22nd, Sarah? Is that right?
The 22nd.
The 22nd, and thinking about how we can move these ideas forward, because the more programs that we have who are engaged in this process and looking at the logic model, which provides them with outcomes, the Holden model, which provides them with what they are doing, what is it, what is youth-led prevention, then we can put together a nice package to put together the case for youth-led prevention in Ohio. And we know that the work is long, and we know that the work is tiring, but we also know that there's high reward to the work that we do. And we've seen a lot of early wins with the logic model. And as we flesh out what youth-led looks like, and as, I don't know if it was Joan or Jody, I couldn't tell, but as we're stepping away from having fun with kids and having lots of pizza and moving to, this is something that only benefits the youth involved, but it also benefits the community. That's a huge step for us. So think about it. If you have any thoughts, you can email Jessica or I or Sarah, or email each other, and we can kind of keep the conversation going. But I'm sure this will resume again when you meet live and face-to-face.
Oh, is it? Okay. So just as a reminder, thank you, Holly and Jessica, for facilitating this webinar. I think you did a fantastic job, and I really appreciate the lively conversation from all of you. I think it's a great start to what we're hoping for this year. So following this webinar, it is being recorded, so I will send it out as a link to all of you with the slides. And then, are there additional resources, Holly and Jessica, that you're wanting to attach with all of this that they're going to get?
No, I think for now, since the model is reflected in the slides, unless people are having difficulty viewing the model in the slides, that would be the only other thing that I would attach. If we have, I think we have the model just saved as a JPEG. Do you think that would be helpful? It might be a little clearer for people.
I definitely think that would be helpful for me to see it.
The other piece we have is we have the original article where Holden and his colleagues, I always feel bad because we call it the Holden model, but there's, I think, 4 authors on this article, so we need to be mindful. Would it be helpful if we sent you that article as well, so you kind of had that justification or backbone or source?
Sure. That would be great.
Okay. We'll make sure that we get and Sarah, if we send this to you and Derek, you'll package it all together for us?
Absolutely.
Great.
Perfect. And then if there's anything, it sounds like, Bobby, there might have been interest about how you report or how you show your numbers from Kelly. So if you want to send that to me, I can send that to everybody if there's interest for that too.
And Cheryl, can you send yours as well?
I can try. I can send you like our outline in terms of like the questions that we ask, but I can't really send you like our system that we use because.
Can you just send us a report out? So I think we're just curious to see, because you have those levels of involvement between, attending a meeting versus leading a meeting versus representing the group. Could you just send us like a sample report that you send to? Are you working with Franklin County Adam? Is that?
Yeah, and I mean, and that was something like they said to us, like, however you guys do it, we just want you to show a progression in the youth that they don't just like go to your conference and then they never show up again. So we want to show that that's like our first step and that there's multiple levels. So we kind of just made it fit to what we do specifically, but I can send that out.
Yeah, even the report's fine.
Okay.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Cheryl and Bobby, for sharing the resources.
I have no problem sending mine as well, but I will say that it's a very early rough draft.
This is a safe zone, Bobby.
Bobby, this is a safe place to explore ideas.
Okay.
Great. Well, thank you.
Sorry.
I just wanted to briefly say thank you to everyone for kind of having the conversation with me and walking through the model and sharing about your experiences pertaining to it. I'll be at the October 22nd Adult Council meeting, so I'm looking forward to kind of continuing the conversations there.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Holly.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Holly.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Bye. Bye.